positive way. I'll be talking to our panelists this afternoon and asking them to share with us the challenges that this scenario has thrown at them, their way forward and the opportunities they see, how they're going to take advantage of those opportunities, and also what can the government do to make this journey much easier and advantageous to all Nigerians. We hope to inform and challenge you during this discourse this afternoon. Thank you very much. I'd like to invite our President, Mrs. Fumi Ogwe, the President of Women in Energy Nigeria, to have her opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fumi Ogwe, and this webinar and the series and the two before it have been brought to you by Women in Energy Network. The Women in Energy Network is an association established in 2020, so in January this year, to provide a platform for women that work across the energy sector to network, develop their confidence, have conversations, grow their careers and their businesses. And our vision is quite simple, is to be that leading network that promotes the participation and advancement of women in leadership across the entire value chain in support of national development. So we essentially aim to be that place where all the other women in the value chain congregate. And so today we have with us three very strong women who are members of our network. And of course, gentlemen who have joined the conversation with us. So I'd like to hand over back to them to have a wonderful conversation this afternoon. Thank you. Ronke, back to you.
Thank you very much, Fumi. So I'm going to start off with introducing the panelists for the afternoon's discussion, and they'll just share with us, who they are and the different strata in which they play in the sector. So I'll start with Amina, who is the Group COO for MRS Holdings Limited. Amina, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ronke. Hi, everyone. Welcome on board, and thank you for taking the time to join us this afternoon. I hope that at the end of this webinar, we would have been able to educate people about what we do in Downstream, the challenges, the opportunities, and hopefully the outlook for the future. I'm the Group Chief Operating Officer for MRS Holdings Limited. MRS Holdings is an integrated trading company. We've got the whole value chain. We have a trading company which is based in Geneva. We have our own shipping company that does ship agency. We have our retail outlets, not just in Nigeria, but in Cameroon, Togo, Benin Republic, and we've got offices in Senegal as well. So pretty much we go across the value chain for Downstream. We're also in pipeline maintenance, security, blending of lubricants, as well as just marketing lubricants. I've been in the industry for 21 years now. I started off by trading, I've done operations, and today I sit atop the group of companies of MRS, having over 719 direct employees and probably another 400 indirect employees. Work, because that's one of our values, that wherever we work, we will respect the laws of the country and we will ensure that we give back, and our people are our greatest assets. I joke about it and say that we're the United Nations because we've got people from all walks of life across different nations and nationalities, and we try as much as possible to bring that to bear wherever we operate, and try to just do the best we can in the industry. So I hope that at the end of this webinar, I would have been able to answer questions and enlighten people on where we are as a company, where we sit within the country and other countries where we operate, and the industry as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amina. I'm going to go to Moroti now, and she would have her introduction to the participants.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the Women in Energy Network for having us here today. My name is Moroti Adidunyadinka. I'm an executive director with the Sahara Group. I've been in this industry for, I think, 18 years now. I started out being the finance manager of the smaller business. Then I moved to the trading business. I did that for, I think, about 10 or 11 years. And now I'm back at the group as financial director strategy. The Sahara Group, just a little bit about the Sahara Group. The Sahara Group operates along the energy value chain. And by that, I mean oil, gas, and power. We play in the upstream, midstream, and downstream segments of the oil and gas sector. And we own generation and distribution assets in the power sector, including ownership of the largest power plant, the largest privately owned power plant in sub-Saharan Africa. We have a staff strength of 4,000 and counting. We have offices in several locations in Nigeria. We have in Ghana, we have in Cote d'Ivoire, in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Zambia, in Dubai, in Singapore, in Geneva, amongst others. Our various locations are integral to the performance of our business in Africa in general, but more specifically to our downstream business in Nigeria. Sahara has a few retail stations, and that's a part of our business that we're looking to grow. We've recently launched our lubricants brand, but our major strength is in the importation, storage, and subsequent marketing of gasoline, gas oil, LPG, and aviation fuel. We operate terminals in Lagos and Onne, where we receive vessels carrying petroleum products. And then we also have aviation terminals at several airports in Nigeria, including Ikeja, Abuja, Kano, and Port Harcourt airports, from where our into-plane fueling activities are carried out. The into-plane fueling is a major part of our business, and we have almost 30% of that market share in the country. I'm hoping that at the end of this session today, we'll all be a little bit more enlightened about how this sector functions, and we can start a lively discourse about how to move the sector forward. And as we do that, at least people will have a better understanding. They will understand what our challenges are and how best to help us as we move the sector forward for the benefit of the entire nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Moroti. Now I'm going to go to the gentleman we have with us, and I'll call on Mr. Yomi Awobokun to share his own introduction to the participants.
Hi, everybody. My name is Yomi Awobokun. I represent Enyo Retail and Supply. Enyo Retail and Supply, we are a young entrant into the market, 3 years old in a month. And we're a pure play fuels retails business, just spreading out across the country. We're just in 17 of the 36 states. At the moment, we only have 90 sites. And I think we're only distributing about 2% of the fuels distributed at the filling stations across the country. We have our own gas brand called Superior Liquefied Gas, which is just being rolled out. We do a deliver to home service. We don't have a lubricant brand. We partner with another marketer, and so we distribute the Castro brand of lubricants. But we have other exciting products apart from fuels that we offer to customers that are different forecourts. I want to commend WIEN, Women in Energy, for this initiative. First of all, I commend them for launching an association in 2020, perhaps a little late, but better late than never. And some of the women on this panel and the women behind this initiative, I know very well. They are powerful women. They've been in this industry as long as the men, are very accomplished. Indeed, the women on the panel are my boss. And so if you're listening in, you are in for a very good session. These are very experienced, capable women. And we, the men on the panel, are also just listening in to learn from them. I look forward to a lovely session. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Yomi. And last but not the least, I'm going to ask Mr. Gute Adeniji to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Bite Adeniji here. I'm a lawyer, first and foremost. I'm generally recognized as a specialist because my practice is focused purely on the oil and gas and energy sectors. So the practice is called Advisory Legal Consultants, and we regularly interface in, if not with government, we'll be with IOCs, to be with independents or even multilateral institutions on issues around the energy sector of the country. So that's what we do. We're just a bunch of specialists. I had the privilege of advising the government on policy over a 3-year period up till December 2015 when I returned back to my practice. During that stint in government, I was basically focused on developing the national petroleum policy and the national gas policy. I'm also developing legislation that would underpin these policies for the government. Also at the same time I was supporting the Minister of Petroleum Resources in oversighting the regulatory and commercial agencies in the petroleum sector. So thank you very much. We hope to have a very engaging session this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Bite. I'm sure everybody who is participating this afternoon have kept their ears to the ground on oil matters. And we've had internal issues to do with oil as well as the global ones. We know on the global front that the price of crude oil has shrunk to the least we've known it to be for most of us. Not just that oil storage across the globe is filled up and nobody wants to buy oil and a whole bunch of things that we're dealing with. But locally, we've seen the price of petroleum PMS gasoline drop from 147 to about between 123 and 125 that we have it now. And then we've also heard the government tell us that subsidies are no more. So whether it's subsidies or under recovery, whatever terminology is used, we find out now that that doesn't exist anymore. More than that, we've heard that there might be privatization or commercialization of the refineries in Nigeria. NNPC is making plans to expand the filling stations out of the country. So there's just so much going on. So it's not just post-COVID that the landscape for the downstream sector is changing. Even during the COVID-19 era, there are changes going on, and we want to bring you abreast of what's happening, how it's happening, and how it's affecting all the other balls that are juggling in the air. So I'm going to start off by asking Amina her first question. There have been several ways in which Nigeria has made fuel petrol available to Nigerians over the years. Different schemes from international companies supplying NNPC to a period when the Nigerian independents were the ones bringing it in on behalf of the government. And then the last 4 years, the government took over the importation of petroleum products. So I'm going to ask her now to just take us through that very briefly. So what effect has the numerous subsidy regimes played on your segment in the business? What challenges has it thrown out? What opportunities has it brought about? And how has it influenced the depth in which you've gone into the different value chains in the downstream sector? Over to you, Amina.
All right, thank you, Ronke. It's been a very interesting ride, just like you said, because I actually watched the industry go from when we had just NNPC doing all the importation through foreign trading companies. And then in the year 2000, I believe it was in August, when President Obasanjo came in and there were all the issues of scarcity, there were lots of fire at the time, smuggling, a committee was set up, and that committee was made up of all stakeholders to look into all the issues that we had in the country. They had a white paper which was done, and that white paper was presented by, at the time they were called the Petroleum Pricing Regulatory Committee, I believe it was in October 2000. And that gave rise to what we then had as the Petroleum Subsidy Fund, because part of the issues that came up was the fact that people were unable to participate in the industry because the pricing regime was not right. It didn't encourage investment. It didn't encourage private sector people to come into the industry. It was also in that white paper, there was the suggestion actually to privatize the refineries the first time. So you probably recall that during President Obasanjo's time, they tried to privatize all the refineries, even though that got reversed eventually. But the subsidy era then brought about a lot of participants. First, we had only the major marketers, and then ourselves and Owando were the first set of people to come into the whole PSF scheme. And over time, we were able to grow, in the first instance, our terminal in business, because at that time we were not doing retail. It was just a market where you needed to just supply the country and people would come to you and take products from you. So that market was created. And then over time, we had other people, particularly people in the banking industry, who realized there was actually an opportunity and they could do it because it was a straightforward market, it was open, it was transparent. They then went into also owning tank farms. And that led to the advent of all the tank farms that we started to see in Nigeria. But there were rules. There was a criteria to participate in the PSF. One of the criteria was that you had to own your depot, and at least that helped to encourage people to own depots. Unfortunately, with all of those investments that were done, you then had, fast forward to, I think it was 2011, thereabout, the Jonathan regime, when they came in and said, well, you were allowed to just have a throughput agreement and you could get an import license. You could also participate in the PSF. And I think we all know what happened with that because it led to a lot of abuses. Okonjo-Iweala, as the finance minister at the time, had to come in and set up inquiry panels, the EFCC, the National Assembly. I mean, the industry went through a phase where having the subsidy in place then created a kind of free-for-all mentality where people thought, well, we just come in and just take whatever opportunities we can, not necessarily deliver the product and just go away. Luckily for us, the industry then got sanitized. And today I can confidently say that anybody who is a tank farm owner is somebody who is taking a long-term view in the industry. Now, fast forward to years after the Jonathan regime, we found ourselves in a situation where prices moved to a point where it was no longer sustainable for us to have the subsidies regime like we did. And as you rightly pointed out, that then gave rise to NNPC being the sole importers and accounting for the differentials as under recovery. Now, just to be clear, I always say semantics, and thankfully, I think the GMD has clarified that recently. When we import, that differential between our landed cost and the price at which government has asked us to sell is referred to as subsidy. When the NNPC does the same transaction, it's referred to as under recovery. So it's pretty much the same thing. But the subsidy era helped to get more people in. It helped to get Nigerians involved in the market. It helped to get people deciding what part of the value chain do I want to play in? Do I want to be a retail owner? Do I just want to be a tank farm owner? Do I want to be a transporter? It really helped to shape the industry. For us, MRS, we looked at it and said, well, we already had the trading arm, so we were able to import. We already had the terminal, and the only part of the chain which was missing for us was the retail, which then led us to the Downstream acquisition, which we did in 2010. We bought Chevron's Downstream business across West Africa. And that's how come you see now the stations that used to be Texaco are now MRS. And it's not just in Nigeria, it's in all the other countries I mentioned earlier. But it changed the whole PSF scheme, changed the landscape. Today, we're back to a point where we are hearing that there's going to be deregulation again. The reason I'm saying we're hearing is, yes, we know that the intent is there, but maybe when the other panelists start speaking, maybe somebody knows something I don't know, but as it stands today, we do not have a policy of deregulation. So we hope to see that coming. We hope that the subsidy or the under recoveries will disappear given where prices are today. The subsidy for us, and I think I speak for everyone on this panel, to be honest, at some point was really just money out the window. We always felt government did not need to be subsidizing PMS. If you really want to talk about subsidy, the people who should get subsidized are the people who have to take buses to work. They don't drive cars that use PMS or gasoline or petrol as we know it. You know, you're talking about market women who have to transport goods and services. The trucks that move goods and services use diesel. Diesel is not subsidized. So from an industry perspective, we'd always felt the whole concept of the subsidy being for petrol was misplaced. But then it was a government policy and it did give us an opportunity to play in the market. But I think that we're also happy that today that has changed, or at least that is changing. With the investments that we've made today, with an open market, we will see the forces of demand and supply come into effect. We will see real competition. We will see that people would have to go in and make investments because you don't have that cushion anymore. With the subsidy, you had guaranteed margins from government. You didn't need to do anything. Without the subsidy, all of us who have invested in the full spectrum of the value chain will be able to take advantage of that.
Thank you very much, Amina. You've set a very good foundation for everybody else to build on. So I'm going to call on Moroti at this time and ask her that with a business that's so highly regulated by government and foreign exchange dependent also, we shouldn't forget the aspect of the foreign exchange. How have you over the years structured your business model to adapt to the different changing government policies and how business is being done? And how have you managed the foreign exchange aspect of your business? That, there's still issues with influencing government policy, managing exchange rate, chasing up subsidy payments, the debts you have to your bankers because the government is still owing you, and so many other things. And then there's also the interaction between so many departments, so many ministries, so many agencies with government. How have you been able to adapt and make your business model robust enough to handle all of that?
Thank you, Ronke. I think that first of all, with any business, I think the most important thing is to know and understand the business that you're doing and to appreciate the realities of the environment in which you operate. I mean, once you understand that, it'll go a long way in helping you to navigate the business terrain. Doing business in Nigeria, I guess one can call interesting, especially in the downstream sector that we're in. Over the years, a few things have, helped us. I'm going to speak to a few of those things. First and foremost, I think the one thing that has helped us the most is that we maintain a high level of integrity. As Amina alluded to, many years ago, there were many entrants into the sector because you no longer needed to own storage. You could simply have a throughput agreement. This also, unfortunately, led to a lot of unethical behavior within the sector. So it was very, I guess, difficult for some suppliers to find businesses that were ethical, that had integrity, and you could partner with them. And so over time, we've been able to build partnerships that work for us. Our partners can trust us to do business in the right way. So whilst there are other businesses who, when there are turbulent times, find it difficult to access finance, we are able to operate with our suppliers on an open account basis. Suppliers will give us credit, which is only backed by the product that they're selling to us, more or less like a bank. So what that means is that for us on day one, there's no pressure to access the foreign exchange before we can do the trade, because we can spread that requirement over time and wait for the central bank. But then having said that, even after, 90 days, 120 days, you may not have all of the funds that you require from the central bank in today's climate. And so having contracts that are denominated in dollars is a big plus. Part of our strategy is to look for not just local business, but business around us in the region, and also to do business with, international airlines and IOCs. Like I said earlier, our aviation business is a major part of our business. And a lot of that business is done with international airlines. Some of those airlines pay in dollars. So we're able to use some of that to cushion our business, as we go along. The other thing that has helped us through the years is that all of the profit that is generated by our business, we plow back into the business. And a healthy cash flow helps with, doing business. When finance is not so easy, a healthy cash flow helps at that time, and just helps you to be able to sort of stay the course. We're better able to access finance from banks and at better rates than, most people because of our track record. Another thing that has helped us is that we're extremely efficient, at what we do. And I think Yomi can attest to that from his pre-NU days. We run a tight operation because we're watching every bit of our cost, and that has helped us, along the way. Our efficiency ensures that, whatever resources we have, we can optimally, deploy them. Also, our bankers see that, and it goes a long way in helping us fund our business. If I look at the subsidy, if I speak to the subsidy, the subsidy, waiting for those payments was long and it was painful. But then again, that's where having a healthy cash flow helps you. We were better able to weather that storm than most people. The subsidy bill, was a huge drain on our nation's resources. And it's unfortunate because if at the time when those monies were due, 2014, 2015, if they had been paid at that time, at least as a nation, we would have been able to avoid, the huge bill that came from the devaluation of the Naira in 2016. As of today, the marketers are still being owed over 170 billion. And with what's going on right now with the price of oil, I guess it's anybody's guess what's happening to that bill. I don't think it's at the front burner, but be that as it may, marketers still need to be made whole, because when marketers are not made whole, it also affects their bankers as a consequence, and it has a ripple effect. I think the more challenging thing has been, influencing government policy and dealing with the many MDAs that we have to deal with. The Downstream has several associations. One of them is the Depot and Petroleum Products Marketing Association of Nigeria, and Sahara belongs to this. In fact, we're part of the executives. And it's always easier to influence government policy as a body rather than, as an individual business. Of course, the various businesses, they bring their, shall I say, their expertise to the table, and we're part of that. We'll continue to be a part of that, continue to do our bit to be able to ensure that, government policy is influenced in the right way, the right policies, are put in place to secure the sector of the economy. Dealing with the MDAs is, I guess everybody can hazard a guess as to what that would be like. In the private sector, we have KPIs that I suppose are very different from the KPIs that they have in the public sector. But having said that, we're a business, we must remain profitable, we must remain in business, and we must deal with the MDAs. And having dealt with them over time, we can sort of anticipate, the challenges that we will encounter. At the end of the day, really, believe it or not, humility goes a long way in dealing with the MDAs. They're human beings, like you and I, the people who work there. And for as long as, you're not antagonizing anyone, then your business should be fine. We try our best not to antagonize because we know the consequences of, antagonizing regulators. And then I'd like to say at this point that, really dealing with MDAs is not all doom and gloom. Sometimes you get to meet people who are really helpful and they help you to, move your business forward. So by and large, we've been able to weather the storm. Sometimes it gets a little bit tough, especially when you're bringing in product and you're landing at a certain number and you're wondering what your colleagues in the industry or in the sector are doing because, there's no way they can be covering their costs. At that point in time, you kind of think, you take a decision as to whether you also want to join them and lose money or you want to sort of step back and wait until the madness is kind of over. So it's sort of been mixed, but we've been able to, weather the storm whenever they arise.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Yomi, I'm coming to you now as the youngest person in the sector. So supposedly Enyo is a few years old, but then you're not a new person to the industry. You've been in the industry before your Enyo days. There are three angles in which I want you to speak to. First and foremost, the complexity of financing the downstream sector, both locally and internationally. And then the landscape growing a business in these times. What have you used to differentiate yourself? What have you leveraged off? And I mean, as a young company, I'm sure you guys are doing a lot of stuff with technology, automation and whatnot, and you're probably going to use some of those things to try and catch up at least with the other guys that have been here forever. So can you just touch on those points for us, just to put some balance to, the MRSs that have been here forever and the Saharas that are playing in a niche space? Thank you.
Okay, Ronke, thank you. Let me start by, just a comment to Moroti's last one. I did do business with both Sahara and MRS, and I still do. They're both run by fantastic people, both first-class organizations, and both have women at the helm of affairs. So kudos to us that we have the opportunity to, say a few things, about these organizations and the women that run them. You're right, Enyo is 3 years old. Our birthday is actually in a month. It's been an exciting journey. We do have some experience. And let me start by saying that's really how we started. We started because we were trained in the industry. We know the industry fairly well. Over 15 years experience, at the helm of the organization. And we're trained by the best. And so that was our first, marketing edge to capital. We were able to raise capital from people who understood the industry and understand the risks. We have shareholders that are industry professionals themselves, 2 shareholders, and we have a good reputation, and capital is tough to come by, certainly for the downstream, but we were able to raise initial capital to grow the business very quickly over the last 3 years. We are now able to distribute just over 35 million liters of gasoline a month, and we only distribute from our stations. We don't do other channels. We don't do cash and carry, etc. And we're still growing. We also have a first-class team. And for those out there who are looking to raise capital, let me say that those are the things that the owners of financing look at. They look at reputation of the team. They look at the depth in the team, who's in the team and what have they done before. And they look to see if there's an alignment between the things that they intend to do and the things that they've done before. And for us, a few things, a lot of those things, were aligned. And so we went through the same scrutiny you would go through, but we were able to successfully raise the capital, also because the people who supported us understand the industry fairly well. Our edge is to focus. So we don't import gasoline. We don't import products at all. We leave that to the MRSs and the Saharas who are our customers. I think one of the very first products or product batches we bought, we actually bought from Amina. And I dare say on this call, we bought on credit because at the time we had very little capital. And we've continued to do business with them. And Sahara has also become one of our suppliers, and they're a company that we know very well from our old, where we worked last. And so we focus primarily on fuels retailing at the forecourt, which means that the expertise you will see in our organization have to do with forecourt design, have to do with forecourt operations and technology, have to do with supply chain management, have to do with training and development of forecourt employees, have to do with branding. A lot of times people come to us with teasers, deals that have to do with things that we don't do, and the answer is we don't do them. We're differentiating in the areas that we're strong. We're strong in forecourt operations, forecourt management, in finding great sites and operating them to be fairly more competitive than our competitors, no matter how close or far. Our edge really is the technology that we sit on. We sit on very intelligent, very proprietary technology that ensures there's visibility and transparency and control right across the value chain. And so for the size of business we do, within the time frame we've built it, we actually have very few people. I think in head office, we are less than 50. Even though in the whole organization, we're about 1,200. And so we've scaled pretty quickly. We don't do a lot of the things that typical organizations in our space do. We don't have record keeping that's manual. Our record keeping is, it's automatic, it's digital. We use cloud computing, we use mobile technology, fingerprinting, biometrics, and the works. We want to be leaders in the sector in the use of technology for the downstream. And so that's how we're building out. We think that we bring an exciting edge into the market. We think the market is wide open. There's certainly a lot of room for growth. It is still a low margin space. And so we've got to keep an eye on our cost. But with technology, you can do a lot more things than you can do with humans. But you still need the human beings, but at a higher level of engagement. And that's our edge. Post-COVID, I suspect that there will be some changes. Consumers will change. There'll be some changes in buyer behavior. But what I don't think will change is that consumers will still want brands that respect them, brands that are honest and transparent, brands that are keen to increase the convenience of the customer, and brands that know how to say thank you. And that's the sort of brand we want to be. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yomi. Okay, so I'm going to take a bit of a diversion and talk about the assets that the government actually have. The largest asset that the government has is the refineries, and there's been a lot of talk about the refineries. Is government going to keep it? Are they going to sell it? Are they going to have somebody else manage it? How much are we getting out of the refineries? And at the last check, I know in the last 2 years, the refineries have almost been vacant in production. But Nigeria doesn't just have the refinery as its asset. It has a whole wide range of pipelines that cut across the country. They have depots, they have storages, they have all kinds of other assets that people aren't even aware of. And with the fact now that Nigeria is not earning revenue like it should be, I know government is trying to cut costs across the board. One of the cost centers for the government is the refinery and the assets that we sit on that are not producing and not adding value to our bottom line. If they sold the refineries today, I'm not sure what the value is, but it does have some value, and it's better that we're not earning something, but we've already sold it. But right now on the budget is costs for staffing the refinery, the numerous turnaround maintenances that we've had that have gobbled up humongous amounts of foreign currency. We have pensions, we're still paying old refinery staff, and a whole lot of stuff. And then we have pipelines that we're not using because of the issues of vandalization. We have depots. And now we find out that NNPC, as the government importer, is actually using depots of private companies to store the fuel. So I'm going to turn around and talk to Moroti now and ask her that, what exactly is going on with all these assets? Where do you see us going with it? What should the government be doing? And how should we monetize and make sure that we move the government downstream assets from being a cost center to the country to a profit center, or at least to cash on our books? So Moroti, I'm going to let you talk about that.
Thank you, Ronke. Okay, to just put some context, in 2019, in the first half of the year, the refineries averaged a utilization rate of 4.3%. Between July 2019 and now, they've been dormant. The last monthly report from NNPC, which was for October 2019, the refineries had recorded a cumulative loss of 123 billion naira. That's about $342 million from January to October of 2019. So you ask, if a business is losing you so much money in 1 year, is it necessary to keep it? In 2018, the federal government partnered with two consortia for the rehabilitation of Warri and Kaduna as one transaction, and then Port Harcourt Refinery as the other transaction. Sahara was a part of the Warri and Kaduna transaction. The estimated cost at that time for the rehabilitation of all three refineries was about $2.5 billion. Unfortunately, the deal didn't go through. At the final stages, something happened and it fell through. The government cannot today, with oil below $20, afford to rehabilitate and operate the refineries on its own. Ideally, government should continue with the sale of the refineries, but they might also want to consider partnerships, especially with today's oil prices. Partnerships work, and what will partnerships do for you? If you partner with the right people, then you're able to bring on additional expertise so that when the refineries are rehabilitated, then they function as efficiently as they should. I'll give an example. So with the Ivorian refinery, the government owns less than 50% of that refinery, both directly and indirectly through Petrosi. They've successfully collaborated with private companies over the years, and the refinery runs efficiently. In fact, we also lift some of our aviation fuel from that refinery. In January, the Ivorian refinery, it's called SIR, was able to raise 577 million euro to finance its operations. That's only because, it works efficiently and the funding partners see some value, Partnering with the right people who have the right expertise is key. If I give another example of Pakistan, in 2005, the state-owned refinery was sold. There was significant investment. There was an expansion of the capacity. So refineries, I believe that our refineries can work if we have the right expertise. But over the years, we've tried to fix those refineries several times, and we're still left with refineries that are doing 4.3% in the first half of the year. So it's necessary that, we should look at other alternatives. The same with the other assets that we have, the Atlas Mosimi pipeline, that costs the government millions in product losses. You put in product at Atlas Co, by the time you get to Mosimi, you've lost a huge amount of that product. The same with the Escravos terminal that has been abandoned. In today's world where, we're producing crude and we're not able to sell it, we can't overemphasize the importance of having crude storage. But unfortunately, the Escravos terminal, has been abandoned for now. So it's important for government to look for the right partners. I don't think that the best way forward would be to first rehabilitate before selling. I think it's good to, put out a bid and let people bid for those refineries. Let the new investors rehabilitate the refineries so that they're working and there's a reduction in the amount of fuel that we're having to put. Look, if our refineries are working, I mean, we cut out immediately the cost of transporting crude out of here to go and be refined and transporting it back as product to sell. So, you know, there are only advantages to us by the refineries working. I think that we're on the right path. It might take us a while to get there, but I believe that with the way we're going, I think we're on the right path to, you know, getting investors into the refinery and getting the refineries to work. In any case, you know, once the Dangote refinery comes on stream, it will change the playing field. And so we need to do something about our existing refineries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Moroti. Okay, so now we've heard a lot of what the challenges are, the different nooks and crannies of the downstream sector. We've talked about assets, we've talked about the finance, we've talked about supply, we've talked about the government angle. I'm going to, you know, bring a bit of a different perspective to the table, just to stimulate our minds. I'm going to bring on Bite Adeniji to speak to the fact that there's a potential that gas might come and out the downstream sector. Gas can replace fueling cars, can replace powering our generators because there would be the issue of gas to power, can power the industries. So this whole gas angle, I know the government have, you know, played around with it. We've heard it on and off, and then it comes on and it disappears. And I know that there are policies behind this gas. So I'm going to actually bring Bite on now to share with us what his views are, what will be the quick steps towards, you know, either capturing that alongside fixing the issues on the downstream sector, or maybe it's even going to take the downstream sector out and shrink it considerably. So I'm going to allow Bite the floor now to speak to the gas aspect of the downstream industry. Thank you.
Well, to the matter is this, of all the assets that the nation has, the most abundant of it is gas. And it's that's that asset that has the potential of completely changing our economic fortunes. And that's a good part. On paper, it could radically shunt what we know as the existing downstream product segment aside. It has because it can bring forward a much cheaper factories, could bring cheaper fuels to us in our transportation systems, cheaper cooking fuel also to us at home. It's got all that potential, but the big problem is political will. It's very clear, going back, let's even stay in the democratic era. So last 20 years, it's very clear that our governments have not walked the walk that they're supposed to do as far as gas goes. The political will is not as strong as it should be. So it was only until December 2017 that the government actually had its first policy around gas. It was the first time since 1959 when hydrocarbon was always found that government actually issued a policy around gas. It's the most abundant hydrocarbon. So the question is this: where do we go from here? Yeah? If we recognize that it can bring forth all those possibilities. When we look at that policy, it says we want to move away from being a nation that's so dependent on oil revenues to one that actually uses oil, crude oil, and gas, right, for development, i.e. industrialization. But the question is, what has happened since 2017? Because you're meant to move forward and now implement the reforms that you committed to as a government. Reforms to the legislation, that's legal reforms, regulatory reforms, institutional reforms, fiscal reforms. It's when you actually undertake that combination of reforms, that's really when you now can present a very attractive investment environment, right, to people who can now put money into all the various things that are possible, into industrial plants, into infrastructure, into so much, right? But as we are today, hardly anything has been done. Legislation was put to government. It died in the office of the president. It was passed by the National Assembly. It only just needed assent. It was not assented to. The recently departed Chief of Staff led a team to develop new legislation. Well, unfortunately, he has died now because he would have been the champion of that process. But there's no legislation. So therefore, basically things are basically still stultified, which means the opportunity, right, is just hanging. Now, okay, so recently we had the GMD of NNPC announce a new policy change, which is basically sunset on regulation of the products sector, right? Which is really sunset on subsidy, right? Can we take that as binding? We didn't hear it from the minister, we heard from NNPC. We didn't hear from the president or from Asurok itself. So we don't know. So it's still in the air. Supposing the price of oil goes up again, is there a chance that we're still going to end up back to where we were? So we don't know. Things are up in the air. But in a normal environment, what should happen, right, would be for gas to easily displace expensive fuel coming from the downstream product sector. So let us hang our hopes on the gas process plants that are being developed, if we are also in planning, right? So maybe if additional production starts coming from those process plants, production of lean gas for power, production of LPGs, which could go into transportation, which could go into cooking fuels, which could go into the power sector as well. So maybe that will help, right? But the policy environment, the will rather, right, of the state, right, is not clear and is not strong. So it's very difficult for one to say with confidence, right, that there is a true challenge of gas against the product sector. Ordinarily, it should be. But
Thank you so much.
Because the will of the state is not clear.
Thank you very much. Now that Bite has told us that gas isn't coming to take out the oil part of the downstream sector immediately, then maybe we should ramp up on our downstream refining capacity. We have our refineries not working. Everybody's hinging their hopes on the Dangote refinery coming up. And there's a lot of talk about modular refineries. Most people don't even know what that means. There's talk about mini refineries. We know there are illegal refineries in the Niger Delta, and all kinds of postulations about what can be done to make sure that we're not spending our very scarce foreign exchange importing petroleum products. So Yomi, back to you. How is the Dangote refinery going to change the landscape? What are we going to do about all these postulations about all these other kinds of refineries that are just magically going to stop us spending dollars importing petroleum products, and we'll be awash with petroleum products in Nigeria, and we'll almost be exporting to the whole of Africa? So can you speak to that?
Ronke, listen, the downstream has suffered a very negative narrative for years. I've been in it for 16, 17 years, and it's been one negative narrative or the other. Out of no fault of anybody, certainly nobody on the call. But I'll tell you something. We may just be about to start to celebrate things that are, of scale and of very, fundamental value to us. And one of those things is this Dangote refinery. It just brings a lot more, excitement to the value chain. From a jobs perspective, skills that hitherto were not necessarily respected or used or retrained for in the country. All of a sudden, there's need for them, and in the West, you understand? And there are also licenses that the government has given to others for modular refineries. And essentially what that just means is that if you have a modular refinery license, it says two things. Number one, you've chosen to take part in the refining of crude oil to make only certain products, not the whole gamut of products. And also, modular refineries are typically not very big. There are a few big modular refineries, but in our own context, when people say here they want to build a modular refinery, you'll see that they're not very big refineries. They're typically small. So let's stay on the Dangote refinery. Fantastic, exciting possibility. I've been there many times. I want to say to people on the call, if you're mobile, suddenly after COVID lockdown, jump in your car, get a vehicle, drive and go and see what is happening in that part of Lagos. It's exciting. New jobs, new opportunities, huge investment that portends well for the economy. We will start to have different conversations around supply. A lot of the unions, whether it's MOMAN or DAPMA or IPMAN or, have all been sweating hard to get us steady supply. These unions, 90% of the time, are really, lobby groups to contribute to the debate, with the authorities to ensure that the outcomes portend well for the industry. They will still be needed, but they will be needed, in other things, because supply will, to a large extent, be fixed. Refining capacity in the country will go to a very, very high level. As a matter of fact, we will start to see opportunities for exports, and all the export-related businesses will get opportunities, and also different products. It's a full-scale refinery. It's a beast. We're talking about 650,000 barrels of crude a day. Think about the supply chain, the trucking, the fleet operations, the offshore operations, the crude supply, the insurance, the banking. It's massive. Cleaning, environmental services. So I see it as certainly one of the bigger game changers in our space before we all eventually dump fossil fuels. This probably will be the next big change before we dump petrol, before we all sell our businesses and maybe join Mr. Gbite to be lawyers advising the government. I don't know how much money he makes. But let me talk specifically about how it affects the outlook. We will start to see a reorganization of the forecourts. You see, a lot of the players in the sector are the sizes they are because of supply issues. So entrepreneurs who've built their stations would typically brand in an NU or any other brand because they are guaranteed supply amongst other things. We're going to start to see that change. There will be a change in the logistics value chain. People will start to create new products, leveraging the supply and the potential gluts coming into the market to attract new brands and create new brands and ensure that end-to-end value delivery is done by a separate company whilst the brand is carrying another name. Huge changes. We're going to see changes when it comes to financing of products, products to the stations, because the transparency is a lot more. The fuel is being produced in Lekki and it's going to a station anywhere in Nigeria. End to end, you have a lot more in your control. We will also see new challenges, as you would expect. Some of the old challenges will mutate, against this new opportunity, and the players have to be ready. In summary, this is my view. the Dangote refinery is one of the most exciting things happening in the market. The big companies would automatically benefit because they have scale. Some of the mid-tier companies also have to, compete and form alliances, to have, if you like, a stake in what's in the cake that the Dangote refinery will present. And all of the small companies will have to seriously innovate, seriously mutate, join bigger companies. We will see a reorganization of the downstream. And guess what, Ronke? The narrative will be positive. That's, for me, the most important aspect of it. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you very much, Yomi. Our time is speeding by very quickly. We've been here for an hour. Luckily, some of the conversations we've had have been able to answer some of the questions that have been posed, but we want to try and make sure we answer as many of your questions as possible. So I'm going to throw a question to Amina right now. And I know that people are quite concerned about pricing, the retail price at the pump. PPPRA has been the agency that has been handling the pricing. They're the ones that modulating the price going forward as we stand right now. They've changed the prices twice in the last 1 month. But then there's some issues that are coming up. What's going to happen if you're supposedly in a deregulated market? Is there a need for anybody to be modulating prices? If PPPRA is no longer modulating prices, what's going to happen to all those agencies that are defunct? If we're removing subsidies, that means we're not just removing subsidies on the pump price. We're also supposed to be removing subsidies on the Petroleum Equalization Fund. So the whole landscape is still a little bit murky in terms of what's going to constitute the price at the pump, especially with the devaluation of the Naira. If the Naira continues to depreciate, we're going to see an automatic rise in pump prices, even without the crude prices moving up. So with the crude prices below $20 per barrel right now, we're at 125. If that doesn't move and the Naira continues to be devalued, we can go beyond the 147 and almost hit 200 Naira per liter at the pump. So what are your views on this, Amina?
So the question is, what are your options, right? Because I always say to my guys, we have to take a realistic view of the market. So let me start first by addressing the PPPRA question. We've also asked the same thing. And I think it was one of the things Bita was talking about, where he was talking about policies of government. If the PIB is passed, PPPRA will not exist as we know it today, right? There would be a body or an agency that sort of regulates prices, but no, not regulate, that ensures that the consumer is not taken advantage of, right? So it's almost like a consumer protection type thing, just to ensure that there's fair play in the market, but the prices are not going to be regulated. If the PIB gets passed, whenever that happens, PPPRA as we know it today is supposed to modulate price. But what we've also asked, even with these discussions about no more under recovery, no more subsidy, we're asking the same questions. If PPPRA today does not tell us what price to sell diesel at, why should they say at what price PMS should be sold at? The market has to determine the price. And guess what's going to happen? People have this fear that, oh, if the government does not regulate, marketers will take advantage. But I can tell you that that's not going to happen. I think that my colleagues on the panel would tell you that if you're looking for people who are very happy to undercut each other, look for downstream marketers. Everybody wants to be the lowest priced product owner in the market. And you're going to see that happen. We've seen that at times when prices were even regulated and there was just some semblance of a margin, you find the next person will drop his price because he wants to sell more. The competition in the downstream, because of the subsidy, has not been real competition. If you recall, I did say that because you had fixed margins, you didn't see real competition. what you will find when there's real deregulation is that I'm going to be out there competing for people to come into my retail station based on the services that I'm willing to render, based on the prices that I'm willing to offer. It'll be a whole different landscape, right? Now, coming back to the question you asked about PPPRA, even with the current pricing scheme that PPPRA has today, there are two pricing schemes. They would tell you that you're allowed to sell at X price from your terminal if you're not selling with PEF, whereas there's a different price if you're selling with PEF. That's also another question that we've asked. What is really the relevance of PEF? Because once you start to talk about deregulation, once you start talking about subsidy removal, then the market should really determine its price. I recall I was watching an interview that the GMD gave, I think it was on Arise or something, and he was asked the question that if you deregulate, there seems to be this sentiment about, oh, prices in the north will be higher than prices in the south because they don't have jetties and, you know, basically facilities through which they could receive products that would make it cheaper. And the question he asked was, how is it possible that Coca-Cola today sells Coke at the same price in the north as it does in the south or the west or wherever else? You will start to have real market activities. People would have to go back to the drawing table and say, okay, I need to reorganize my business. What kind of logistics do I need? What do I need to do? PPPRA would be totally irrelevant. Even in the scheme of things today, they modulate prices, they look in the market, but they would have to then change their focus to being one that is more of a consumer protection type, saying prices cannot go above certain limits, just so that marketers are not taken advantage of. But just before I conclude, I think that because I see there are quite a number of questions, I think I should answer a few questions. People have asked about how feasible do we think subsidy removal is. The question I think people should be asking themselves is, if subsidy is not removed, what are our chances of survival as a country? That's the question that we need to ask ourselves. Before the whole COVID issue, we had 1 trillion naira in the budget for 2020 to be used for subsidies. In the same budget, if you look at it, you have 500 billion budgeted for roads. Does it really make sense to say that you are subsidizing petrol? Petrol is money that's gone into the air because you burnt it. You can't touch it, you can't feel it. And truth is, who are the people who benefit? It's you and I. We're the ones who have cars that we need to move around, whereas the person who needs the actual subsidy is not getting it. So I think that we need to change the narrative where people stop asking the question, do you think it's feasible? Or is it something government should do? Or if prices go up, how would government react? Question is, government has no business putting any subsidies for petrol in the first place. And then also to your question, Ronke, where you had also asked about pricing. We know that you have the issue of reduction in global prices for crude oil, but that also corresponds to the foreign exchange which is available, because most of the revenue that comes into this country today is actually all of the crude oil that we sell, at least the bulk of it. The I&E window is not that active, and I think we know that. But what we should be focusing on is to say that that money which we're getting from crude oil should be used for agriculture, it should be used for manufacturing, it should be used for all the other things that we need to actually see the country move forward, as against just giving it to a few individuals who benefit from it. There's a question about foreign exchange. If we would import products, sorry, the question is, with the subsidy removal, do we see ourselves importing white products? The answer is yes. If the subsidy is removed, if the foreign exchange is available, we'll be more than happy to import. That is what we all hope for. We want to run a business where we don't need to go to government to ask government for anything. You know, we're talking about subsidies. We're being owed subsidies from 7 years ago. this administration has been in government for 7 years, right? And today, we're talking about payments from deliveries we made during the last administration. To that end, there's also a question someone has asked, why are we not able to sue government for those amounts outstanding? I think the question is, I think the answer is clear. You can't fight government. At the end of the day, it is simply impossible to fight government. We will just continue to lobby government. We will continue to appeal to them to say that, particularly now with the whole COVID issue, where you have government putting in all kinds of palliatives, all kinds of, what do you want to call it, moratorium, all kinds of things in place. Look into the oil industry. We're not even asking for anything. We're saying, pay us what you owe us. Because if we get that money, we're still going to invest it in this country. We're going to invest it in the businesses that we do. And we will then be able to see things even happen more. So I hope that I have answered the
Thank you so much, Amina. You have answered a lot of the questions. Yomi, I'm sure you're checking the chat and you have about 10 questions to answer. People want to understand what's going to happen to your business after COVID-19, or when prices start to climb back up. They want to know about your business model. They think you're the star of the young people. So fire away and start answering all their questions that they put to you.
Ronke, I'm doing that. Can the people also tell Amina and Moroti to sell me cheaper diesel and petrol, please?
Please, Amina and Moroti, sell him cheaper prices, please. Give him cheaper prices.
That's not an issue. You can have whatever you want.
If we sell him cheaper price diesel, I hope that he'll share some of the profit with us.
Okay, so Yomi, it's over to you now.
Okay, listen, our time is far gone. Ronke, really thank you for this session. I've tried to answer as many of the questions as I can. I think I'll just take a few live because it's probably shorter. Someone's asked here, what are the drivers of the industry as we see it going forward? The drivers are, in my view, scale, expertise. Operators in the space must know what they're good at and stick to them. We never set up to copy MRS. They are very good at many things because they're a massive organization. They have a massive jetty, very good with supply, very good with retail, very good at financing, and they are pan-West Africa. And so we've just focused on our niche. Sahara is the same. They're actually pan-Africa. They also have a global trading play, and they are also into supply. They are much smaller than we are when it comes to forecourt, which is where we are perhaps stronger and bigger. But the point is that one of the drivers is players must be very clear what they're good at and focus on that. Secondly, we are very keen to partner. We believe that there are places to compete, but there are also lots of opportunities to partner. So we're always looking for collaborations that can transform the industry. Like I said to you, for example, we don't blend our own lubricants. We're very happy to market, lubricants of any of the players, provided they are the quality that we need and the terms work for us. Our goal, however, is to ensure that customers get well serviced when it comes to vehicle maintenance. And so we have a vehicle maintenance business. And so we use Castro at the moment because those are the guys that we've partnered with. That's also a driver. Another driver is capital. And what capital requires is, first of all, it needs for all of us to contribute to a positive narrative of the downstream. Women in Energy is doing that. DAPMA, MOMAN, individual businesses are doing that. And secondly, for businesses to be run in a transparent, honest, and professional manner. The businesses on this panel are run like that. Businesses that do those things attract capital naturally. My fourth and final drive, and there are many others, but the fourth and final today would be people and technology. We must have the best people, and generally downstream people are great people. They work very easily with very low margins. We're talking about 4 to 5% margins. We don't sell beer or sell, or female hair where the margins are almost 100%. We sell petrol, diesel, margins are 2-3%, 4% if you're lucky, 5%. And our people are, we must commend the team. I certainly commend my team at Enyo. I'm sure Amina does the same. Amorochi is doing the same for all the people. And we must leverage technology in a way and manner that allows us to innovate. We've got to move our businesses from just pure play fuels retail businesses to lifestyle businesses that increase the convenience of our customers whenever they interact with us. Those will be my own drivers of the business into the future, and we must scale them. Ronke, I think I've answered all the questions addressed to me. If I may, I think the final thing that I would say, except you asked me another question, Ronke, is that I want to challenge even the panelists and everybody listening that there is now a need for new associations, or for our associations to have a new ethos. Associations that focus only on supply side lobbying and engaging with the government for supply side activities and benefits, I think their time has come to an end. Conversations around margin increases, I find very boring. And I think it's part of what is killing the downstream. We've got to go to the government with a more holistic conversation that is not us asking for margins. No business asks its government for margins. I think we should stop it. People who are innovative don't bluntly say we want more margin. They find creative ways to get what they want for their industries, but they also make customers feel like they're more important than anything else. Us going cap in hand for margins, I think makes us, just doesn't allow the narrative that we want to expose to be exposed in the way that we want it exposed. Ronke, thank you. Amina, you're a superstar. Egbon, thank you. Moroti, thank you very much.
Okay, so we have just about 15 minutes to go, and we want to make sure we use it very well. And I'm just going to go through my panelists now and ask them for one last word. One, I hope we've already educated you, given you information and stimulated this your minds with opportunities. I want them to touch on one or two gaps they think still exist in the downstream sector, because I'm sure there are players, potential players and potential entrants into the market of, amongst our participants. What areas are not your core areas that if somebody came in from the private sector and field would make life easier for you? You're already in there, you know some things you're doing now that are not your core business, that you wouldn't mind somebody else handling for you. So let's churn out some opportunities for potential entrepreneurs who are listening in. So I'll start with Moroti.
Thank you, Ronke. So I think that as we move forward, Yomi said a lot about technology, right? It's important that, we leverage on technology to, do this business. But also, as we look at the business, product was moved from one part of the country to another part of the country. The parts of the country that are landlocked, we must move product from one part to the other part. I think for any new entrant into the business, you must look at, is it possible, look at the supply chain end of it, and how can you do that efficiently such that you're able to meet, you're able to solve people's problems. Of course, the infrastructure is a problem, but there must be other ways. There must be innovative things that we can do. There's certain things that will be really capital intensive. For example, if we said, oh, let's begin to move product by rail, that would be really capital intensive, but it doesn't mean that it cannot be done. There are things that, we need to look at. And as we go forward, past COVID, the sector itself needs to continue to engage government, such that we leave this industry to function on the basis of, the demand and supply. That way, things will regulate themselves. Once we have a level playing field and government is not intervening either in, bringing in the product or the foreign exchange, we have a level playing field. People will benefit from the efficiencies that will begin to exist in the sector. Because once government hands off, really, just like in the AGO, people will compete, and it's the most efficient person that will get, the business. That way, it can only benefit the final consumer. So going forward, there are many things that will post-COVID, obviously. I think demand will reduce. But post-COVID also, emphasis will be on efficiency. Emphasis will be on how well you can do your business. Because right now, with where the price of oil is at, there's no incentive for government to, be in that sector trying to regulate anything, because there's simply no subsidy. So, I mean, a few things, like I said, going forward, we need to engage government. For people who want to come into this industry or this sector of the economy, they need to be looking at supply chain. How can we deliver product faster and better and in a more efficient manner? And they need to also be looking at technology. How can we leverage technology to make this sector better? I think that's it from me. Thank you.
Hello. We may have briefly lost.
Oh no, I'm back on. So
Okay.
Moroti, there's a specific question that has been posed to you. What do you think is going to happen, and do you think Nigerians are going to embrace renewable energy like biofuels? Because everybody does scenario planning. One of the things that a downstream oil company should have is what happens if my part of the business wipes out? If renewables come to play, what are you guys on the side doing some R&D on the renewable side to make sure that you don't get lost, completely if there's a disruption? We've talked about gas being a disruption. Somebody's putting renewable energies also on the table. Have you looked at that at all?
So as a group, we're constantly looking at the different, things going on in this sector, not just in Nigeria, but globally. But if I can speak to that, I think that, we're not near there yet. I think before we get there, we're probably going to have to sort of sanitize and make the sector as it is today better, because there are a lot of obstacles in the way. But as a business, like I said, we're constantly looking at our options. We don't only look at what is going on in the country, but because we have an international presence, we're also looking at what is going on in the rest of the world and seeing how, we can bring that into our own economy, if at all. I don't know if that answers the question.
Thank you so much. Okay. Oh yeah, that's fine. Thank you. So I'm just going to nip over and go back to Amina, and then we'll speak with Bite, and then we'll talk to Yomi. So Amina, the floor is yours.
So for me, I think that there are lots of opportunities. We went from a model where we owned our own trucks to outsourcing transportation of products. So if there are professional hauling companies out there, we would be more than happy to work with them. That is a part of the value chain that we have no interest in playing in. We've done it before, it just didn't work for us. We realized that's not something we're good at, so we let that go. Also technology. For us today, we do use a lot of technology, a lot. We want people to be able to work from home, even after this whole COVID thing is over. I'm not sure that we want to see everybody come into the office, as long as you can work from wherever you're at, and we can measure the work that you're doing. So if there are people who have, tech gurus, come up with apps, come up with all kinds of things that you think can help improve our business. We're not in the business of IT. We're not a tech company. So that's also an area where people can also play and send us all kinds of things, and we'll be happy to look into. There was a question, I believe, someone had asked a question about HSE and the attendance and training at the retail station. So I'd like to touch on that. What we've done is we've come up with a scheme where we're taking each station by the day and training the attendants, not just with regards to HSE, but even on things like customer relationship, because you have to realize that your attendants are the first face that people see. If you go to a station, the first person you would meet is the pump attendant. He has to be able to talk to you, he has to be polite. So that's something that I think that a lot of downstream companies today are putting a lot more emphasis on. If you recall, I had said, once the regulation is over, it becomes a service-driven industry. And people have already taken a view on that to say, in view of this, we need to start training our people. We need to start getting ready for all of these things. Now, with renewables, for me, I think that is something that is very long-term for Nigeria, but not long-term globally. In countries like Europe and most other advanced countries, in a few years, you're not going to have fossil fuel like we have it today. Most of them, if you go to stations abroad today, you've got charging points for electric cars, right? So we do need to start thinking about the balance. I don't expect that fossil fuels will disappear immediately, because let's be honest, we don't even have enough electricity to power factories, to power our daily lives. I don't know how we're gonna have electricity to charge cars, you know, and things like that. So, but I think that as we go forward, it's not going to be an issue of whether Nigeria wants to join in on that. It's that we're gonna go and buy cars. Some of those cars will no longer use fossil fuels. So you would have a point where there's almost a balance, and then you will get eased out eventually. And I think that when we get to that point also, we won't be using fossil fuels. At that point, we will be using gas-powered vehicles. You know, people are going to start to become more aware of cleaner fuels, not just renewables. It's going to be the whole issue about, you know, emissions and all of that. So I think the landscape will change a lot. Just to round up, because I think this is my last comment before we end this. Ronke, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm rounding up, right?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So I'd like to really take this opportunity to thank everyone who's made time to come on to this webinar, to listen to us, to ask questions. I think that the industry is just about to take shape. You know, you've heard Yomi talk about MoMAN, about DAPMA, about lobbying government policies. Moroti did talk about the fact that DAPMA is trying as much as possible to get government to look into issues that have to do with actual operations, not necessarily margins, because we're saying just create an enabling environment for us. Sorry, by the way, I forgot to mention, I'm the first vice president of DAPMA. So in DAPMA also, we're just trying to see how we can get government to look into providing enabling environments and change the discourse from one of margins. It's not so much the margins, it's about your efficiency, it's how you, your own strategic focus, basically. I can't say what would happen tomorrow, but I'm extremely optimistic. It's this optimism that has led us to the point where we've done the investments that we have done. If you come to our terminal today, we're about the only terminal in the entire West Africa that can berth an LR vessel. An LR is a vessel that can take as much as 60,000 metric tons. We brought in a vessel that had 80-something thousand. For us going forward, these are the kinds of things that we want to see people investing in the industry. We've lost too much money paying demurrage, where vessel owners just sit out there, we pay them per day, they take the money and they go away. Within the industry, you don't have to own your tank farm. You can come and say, you know what, MRS, let's work together, just like Yomi said. Let's collaborate. Come, I'll supply you, I'll go to you and say, oh, I see you've got very good logistics. Let's work together. That is the industry that we want to see. We want to see an industry that is market driven, that is customer focused, and is also technology driven. Just to round up, I'd like to thank everyone in Women in Energy Network. It's been a fantastic 3-part series of the webinar. those who are listening, the young ladies out there, I hope that you can see, and we've been able to prove that there are no barriers in this industry. There's a myth. People think, oh, the oil industry is a man's industry. I hope that with the amount of women you have seen in all of the calls, you can see that there are women at the top. It doesn't matter where we're from. It doesn't matter what our religion is. We're just out to get a seat on the table based on our competencies, and the sky's the limit for anyone. As long as you're hardworking, you're trustworthy, you can do whatever you choose to do. To my team in MRS, thank you, because without you guys, I won't constantly be on my feet, because I have a team that is constantly challenging me. You know, I've got young people who will come up and say, well, this doesn't work. So thank you guys. Thank everyone. Thank you to all our customers.
Thank you so much, Amina. I'm going to ask Bite to answer a question that's come up. Somebody wants to know, how are we going to manage this issue of pipelines? They're the most efficient and the cheapest way of moving fuel across the entire country. But with the issues of vandalization and what does he think very quickly? Because we have, we've gone a little over our time and we really wanted to, keep to the time. But can we quickly answer that question before I pass on the floor to Yomi? Is Bite there?
Yeah.
Bite? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, right here. So there's clearly an opportunity for investment in infrastructure, pipeline being one segment of infrastructure going forward. If you're going to an era where the sector is going to be liberalized, then obviously there's going to be a lot more movement of hydrocarbons. So, but because there's a big gap in pipeline infrastructure, it just throws up that opportunity for third parties to come in and invest in new pipelines and even propose to help manage some of the existing pipelines that are crying for better management and also investment in maintaining. So it's very open. But let me quickly say this, that I'm very excited by the opportunity presented by this COVID-induced oil price crash, because now Nigeria is really at this moment of truth, right? We must now go forward and legislate new changes to the industry, because it's those changes, once they're encased, right, in legislation, that would now fully ensure that viable investments can be made into the sector. The opportunities are there, there are many, right? But investors just want to see that there's protection given to them through legislation. And that's what the petroleum industry bill reforms can help achieve.
Thank you so much, Peter. So Yomi, your last word, please. Well, last word of this program, not your last words forever.
Ronke, my last words are, first of all, I want to commend NNPC. I wish there was more time to talk about the role they're playing. They have played, a myriad of roles over the years. It's a very complex industry in a very fast evolving space or world. And, there are conversations about them being regulators and players and how that affects the industry. And perhaps those are conversations for another day. But it must be said that there's a lot of things they've done well and a lot of things they need to continue to consider if the industry must continue to improve. And so NNPC as a whole certainly have a lot to do. And the different organizations that regulate the downstream are also very, very important. And hopefully in the future WAIN seminars, you would have a few of some of those guys in, so that we can also unpack them and understand the way they're thinking about life. DPR, PPPRA. Amina spoke very eloquently about the role of PPPRA into the future and PEF. There's certainly a lot of changes happening, which we must also prepare them for. Secondly, is that there's a lot said about technology, but let me say this, it's not a silver bullet. People have to focus on where they're strong, and every organization will utilize technology as its best can. But what must happen is that we've got to collaborate. I see a world where you know, a lot more marketers buy from the bigger players like the MRSs and the Saharas, and we don't compete with them where we're not strong. However, they also cannot compete with us when they're not strong, and the industry just forms into a nice, you know, nice collaborative industry. It doesn't mean we won't compete, but we're competing around our expertise, generating jobs, paying our taxes, and improving the narrative of the sector. Finally, to you women, I've got to say this. You guys don't do enough to prove that you are smarter than the men. And this forum is one of those things that you've done, but we must say that we want to see more, you know, visibility, especially of women in our industry. If more women were involved at the highest levels, I will not say the rest, okay? I want to thank Mr. Adeniji as well for your contributions to gas. You know, you focused on supporting the government. The last Minister of Petroleum, you know, left your day job, joined the NNPC. People don't say enough about people like you. And some of the projects you worked on will certainly change this industry for the better. So thank you for the work you've done. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for the people who listen to us. God bless you.
Awesome. We have come to the end of our discussion, and first I would like to thank my gracious panelists for their time and the experience and the expertise they've put out to you, my participants. And for my participants, thank you very much for your data. I know you've used up a lot of your data this afternoon. I hope we have sufficiently educated and informed and challenged you during this session. And we look forward to more engagement with you as we go forward. I have to apologize if I skipped anybody's questions or if anybody's questions weren't adequately answered. You have to pardon me for that. I wish you all a lovely evening, a safe time at home. And I hope you're healthy, happy, and home. And please, on the screen in front of you, we have all our different platforms. Please follow us. Check us out, and when next we have something, please be nice to us and you know, join us for our next series of webinars. Thank you so much. God bless you.